This is the story of Tilly, a woman who faced more pain before adulthood than most do in a lifetime. Hello, I'm Sarah, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories of resilience that often go untold. And one of those stories belongs to Tilly, a woman whose journey from rock bottom to redemption will leave you breathless. As someone who spent years working with survivors of trauma, I can tell you that Tilly's story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. So let's dive into the life of a woman who lost everything and came back fighting. You know, when I first heard about Tilly's childhood, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and sadness. Imagine growing up in a house where chaos was the norm, where stability was as rare as a unicorn sighting. That was Tilly's reality. Her mother, battling the demons of addiction and mental health issues, was more of a storm than a shelter and little Tilly. She was left to weather that storm alone. From a young age, Tilly learned that survival was about silence, don't fight, don't act, just survive. It's a lesson no child should have to learn, but for Tilly, it was as essential as breathing. She became a master of invisibility, tiptoeing through life, trying not to disturb the fragile peace that occasionally settled over her home. But here's the thing about trauma, it doesn't just appear out of thin air, it's passed down like a twisted family heirloom. And in Tilly's family, well, let's just say trauma ran deeper than the roots of an old oak tree. Tilly's mother wasn't born into chaos, she was molded by it, just as Tilly would be. History has a way of repeating itself, and for Tilly's family, trauma ran deep. It's like they were stuck in a loop, each generation inheriting the pain of the last. Tilly's mother, a victim of her own traumatic upbringing, couldn't break free from the cycle, and so, without meaning to, she became the architect of Tilly's unstable world. The lack of stability and safety in Tilly's life wasn't just uncomfortable, it was transformative. It shaped her understanding of relationships, of love, of what it means to be cared for. Every day was a lesson in survival, but also a lesson in what Tilly thought love looked like. She watched her mother struggle in abusive relationships, saw the bruises, heard the fights, and slowly, insidiously, a dangerous idea took root in Tilly's mind, that love and pain were two sides of the same coin, that to be loved meant to be hurt. It's a belief that would haunt her for years to come. What happens when the only example of love you've seen is tied to hurt? It's a question Tilly would grapple with for years. Because when you grow up thinking that love and pain are inseparable, you start to believe that's all you deserve. As Tilly stepped into her teenage years, she was like a ship without an anchor, drifting in a sea of uncertainty. And then, like a lighthouse in a storm, a man appeared in her life. He seemed to offer everything Tilly had been craving: stability, affection, a chance at normalcy. But oh, how deceiving appearances can be. He was charming at first, said all the right things, but soon the cracks showed. It started small, as it often does. A comment here, a criticism there. But like a crack in a dam, it only grew larger with time. The emotional manipulation was subtle at first, so subtle that Tilly, with her skewed understanding of love, didn't even recognize it for what it was. But manipulation turned into control, and control, well, control has a nasty habit of turning into violence. Poor Tilly knew it. She was trapped in the same cycle her mother had lived through. History wasn't just repeating itself, it was screaming in Tilly's face, and she couldn't hear it over the sound of her own fear. Tilly became isolated from friends and family, trapped in a world that grew smaller by the day. Her partner, once her supposed savior, had become her jailer, and Tilly, with her childhood lessons of silence and survival, didn't know how to break free. One night, things went too far. Tilly knew if she didn't leave, she might not survive. It was a moment of clarity in the fog of fear and confusion. A voice inside her, small but persistent, whispered that this wasn't love, it was destruction, and Tilly, for the first time in years, listened to that voice. With nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart full of terror, Tilly left. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. Her feet carried her to a women's shelter, a place she'd heard whispers about but never thought she'd need. And there, in a room full of strangers whose stories too similar to her own, Tilly hit rock bottom. That's when Tilly realized no one was coming to save her. She had to save herself. It was a terrifying realization, but also a liberating one. For the first time in her life, Tilly understood that her fate was in her own hands. The first months were brutal, there's no sugarcoating it. Therapy sessions felt like picking at old wounds. Trust was a foreign concept, and the emotional wreckage of her past seemed insurmountable. There were days when Tilly wondered if she'd made a mistake. She should have stayed in the familiar pain rather than face this new, uncertain world. Healing isn't linear, it's 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. Tilly learned this the hard way. Some days she felt strong, ready to take on the world. Other days she could barely get out of bed, haunted by memories and fears. But slowly, painfully, she began to piece herself back together. As Tilly worked through her trauma, she started to address the childhood wounds that had led her into the abusive relationship. It was like untangling a knot that had been tightening for years. Every session, every breakthrough was a step towards understanding herself and breaking free from the patterns that had defined her life. She didn't just want to survive anymore, she wanted to thrive. It was a revolutionary thought for Tilly. For so long, mere survival had been her goal. But now she dared to want more. She dared to believe she deserved more. Tilly found a local women youth support group, and it was like finding a lifeline in a stormy sea, surrounded by women who understood, who didn't judge, who offered support without conditions. Tilly began to rebuild her sense of self. She wasn't just Tilly the victim anymore, she was Tilly the survivor, Tilly the fighter. With newfound determination, Tilly returned to school. She got a job, a small one at first, but it was hers. Every paycheck, every good grade was a victory. She was slowly reclaiming her life, piece by piece. It wasn't easy, but this time, Tilly was in control. She was writing her own story, and it was a story of triumph as Tilly's. Strength grew, so did her desire to help others. The women's shelter that had once been her refuge became her calling. She started volunteering, then working part-time, and finally, Tilly found herself employed full-time at the very place that had saved her life. She's become the person she wished had saved her as a child. Tilly now stands as a beacon of hope for women trapped in the same darkness she once knew. She's living proof that it's possible. To break free, to heal, to thrive, Tilly speaks openly about her experiences breaking the silence for others. She stands before groups of women, her voice strong, her eyes clear, and shares her story. And in doing so, she gives others the courage to share theirs. She's not just breaking her own silence, she's shattering the silence that surrounds domestic violence and generational trauma. Tilly didn't just survive, she broke the cycle, and now she's helping others do the same. Every woman she helps, every life she touches, is a victory not just for Tilly, but for all survivors. She's living. Proof that your past doesn't have to define your future. From survivor to leader, this is Tilly's story. It's a story of pain, yes, but also of incredible strength. It's a story that reminds us that no matter how dark things seem, there's always hope. Tilly's journey from victim to victor is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. So to all the Tillys out there, to anyone who's ever felt trapped, hopeless, or alone, remember this. You are stronger than you know. Your story isn't over, and like Tilly, you have the power to rewrite your ending. You don't just have to. Survive, you can thrive. That's it for this video. Let me know in the comments if Tilly's story resonated with you, or if you have your own story of resilience to share. Remember, your voice matters, and your story deserves to be heard. If you found value in Tilly's journey, please consider subscribing to this channel for more stories of triumph over adversity. And if you or someone you know is in an abusive situation, remember, help is available. You're not alone. Until next time, stay strong, stay resilient, and never stop fighting for the life you deserve. Goodbye.